The odds of a Trump coup attempt in 2024 are dropping fast. The Supreme Court's decision in MOREV v. Harper on Tuesday is a major reprieve for American democracy. By rejecting the radical idea that state legislatures have quasi-unlimited power to determine how elections are run, the court made it harder for lawmakers to engage in the shenanigans that Donald Trump encouraged to overturn his 2020 re-election loss. But the decision is better seen in a broader context. It's one of many recent developments that show our democratic system is fortifying itself on multiple levels, unexpectedly reducing the odds of a rerun of Trump's efforts in 2024. Along with the ruling, virtually all election-denying candidates for governor and secretary of state in key swing states lost in the 2022 midterms. Congress reformed the law that governs how presidential electors are counted. And the national response to the January 6, 2021, insurrection has been surprisingly robust, from the House hearings documenting the gravity of that event to the successful prosecutions of many attackers. None of this was preordained. It happened because the American people made it happen, and because key actors in our system in both parties took the threat posed by Trump and his movement seriously. The political and legal systems have taken significant strides toward protecting the integrity of elections against subversion at all levels, Matthew Seligman, a fellow at the Stanford Constitutional Law Center, told me, though he added that grave threats remain. The court ruling, which upheld the North Carolina Supreme Court's invalidation of a gerrymander by the state legislature, largely rejected the independent state legislature theory, meaning state legislatures will not be insulated from review by state courts and the dictates of state constitutions when setting election rules. As a result, a state legislature probably can't appropriate for itself the power to appoint presidential electors in defiance of the choice of voters, as Trump pressed for in 2020. While other constitutional provisions might prevent this, now it would be directly subject to state court review, as election law expert Richard L. Hassan explains for Slate. A caveat, as Vox's Ian Millhiser notes, the ruling leaves the door open for the Supreme Court to uphold a state legislature's action if it decrees that a state court has gone too far constraining it. But something dramatic like appropriating absolute power to appoint electors after voters have spoken seems unlikely to survive. Meanwhile, Congress revision of the Electoral Count Act of 1887 prevents any future governor from certifying fake electors. That makes it harder for a MAGA-aligned governor to help a state legislature execute such a scheme. And the 2022 defeat of many gubernatorial candidates aligned with Trump means they're not in a position to execute this anyway. Now, Democratic governors in the key swing states can veto a state legislature's effort to change state law to appoint sham electors. The court ruling would mean state legislatures no longer have free-floating power independent of the state constitutional structure, Hassan says. There's more. If MAGA-aligned candidates for Secretary of State had won in 2022, they'd have been well-positioned to execute other mischief, such as interpreting state voting laws or citing fake election fraud to invalidate a particular precinct's voting, says Cameron Kistler, counsel at Protect Democracy. Having election-denying Secretary of State candidates lose across the board is an important bulwark against election subversion, Kistler told me. And lawyer John Eastman is facing disbarment proceedings for fabricating a rationale for Trump's coup attempt. If Eastman loses, it could dissuade Republican lawyers from future schemes. Take all this together, and far fewer opportunities will entice the next enterprising, young Eastman to exploit cracks in our edifice of democracy. In key respects, our national response to January 6 has been unexpectedly good. It has been animated by the idea that January 6 wasn't a fleeting spasm of MAGA rage but, rather, a sign that Trump and parts of his movement pose a lasting threat to our constitutional order. All these developments vindicate that reading. By dramatizing it, the January 6 hearings helped bring down election deniers in 2022 and inspire reforms to the Electoral Count Act, which might not have happened if the public hadn't been on high alert about threats to democracy. There is an important principle at stake here. It's sometimes argued that if bad actors are determined enough, they will succeed, that banking on reform and good faith actors holding the line against efforts to corrupt the system is futile. The counterargument is that while no reforms are bulletproof, our best hope is to shore up the system wherever possible and lend support to good actors, such as the Republicans who held the line in 2020 and the Democrats who beat those election deniers in 2022, who want to make it function. This view has also been validated. All these developments will make future election subversion harder, no matter how determined its perpetrators. In short, our system has acted in meaningful ways to protect itself. Much remains up in the air, and we shouldn't become too sanguine, but if you had predicted these developments back when the smoke was still clearing from January 6, it would have seemed hopelessly naive. The odds of a Trump coup attempt in 2024 are dropping fast. The Supreme Court's decision in MOREV v. Harper on Tuesday is a major reprieve for American democracy. By rejecting the radical idea that state legislatures have quasi-unlimited power to determine how elections are run, the court made it harder for lawmakers to engage in the shenanigans that Donald Trump encouraged to overturn his 2020 reelection loss. But sorry, Republicans, Nikki Haley can't make you young again. Some politicians talk to voters as if we're all children, with little understanding of the world and prone to knee-jerk emotional reactions. While Republican candidates for president courted the religious right at the Faith v. Freedom Coalition conference this past weekend, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley took it one step further, promising nothing less than a restoration of the world of your childhood. Do you remember when you were growing up? Do you remember how simple life was, how easy it felt? It was about faith, family, and country. We can have that again, but to do that, we must vote Joe Biden out. The Swiss doctor who coined the term nostalgia in 1688 saw it as a disease. Today, it's a powerful psychological, cultural and political force, the last especially for conservatives distressed by social change. But what makes Haley's appeal so striking is its explicit evocation of the simplicity and ease of the world when you were growing up, and her preposterous claim that the president can bring you back to that innocent time. On social media, Haley was quickly attacked, especially by women, LGBTQ+ folks and people of color, who noted that the past was not so rosy for them. She didn't specify precisely when this golden age occurred beyond whenever you were growing up. If you're 80, that time was the 1940s and 50s, if, like Haley, you're 51, it was the 70s and 80s. For that to be true, America would have to be on a long and steady decline, with each successive decade worse than the last. Although that's obviously false, it's something people everywhere seem to believe. A recent study across 60 nations found that people worldwide think morality has been declining for years, a belief the authors call pervasive, perdurable, i.e. continuous, unfounded and easily produced. Critically, most people, however old they happen to be, seem to think this decline occurred in their lifetime. Recent polling from the Pew Research Center found that 72% of Republicans said life in America is